You have seen the footage, a 4-trailer monster crawling down a red dirt highway, 174 feet of steel and cattle and dust, a plume you can spot from a kilometer away before you can even hear the engine. You looked at that and thought the same thing everyone thinks, only in Australia. Then you moved on, because the explanation seemed obvious. Big country, empty roads, cowboys doing cowboy things. Case closed. But that is not actually the reason. Not even close. The US is bigger in population and richer in freight. Canada has more empty tundra than Australia has outback. Russia has distances that dwarf the Stewart Highway. Saudi Arabia, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, all enormous, all sparsely populated. None of them run 200-ton quad road trains. So the idea that it is just a big country does not survive 10 seconds of actual scrutiny. Something else is going on. The real answer is not geography. It is something older than trucks, older than diesel engines, older than Australia itself as a federation. It is a chain of historical accidents and one bush mechanic's backyard invention that the rest of the world tried to copy and failed, and it connects directly to something sitting in your kitchen right now, and to a camel that died in 1935. The full answer has 4 parts. Most people only ever hear the first one. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why those trucks are where they are and nowhere else. And you will never look at an outback highway shot in a documentary the same way again. But let's start with what everyone gets wrong. Here's the first thing most people don't realize. Road trains are not unique to Australia at all. Canada runs them. The United States runs them. Argentina, Mexico, India, even Zimbabwe has a single highway where 42-meter road trains haul chrome ore. Sweden and Finland allow 25.25-meter European modular system combinations. They are called different names in different places. Turnpike doubles, Rocky Mountain doubles, LCVS, long combination vehicles, but the basic idea of a prime mover pulling more than one trailer is not an Australian invention. So the question is not really why road trains exist in Australia. It is why the Australian version is 3 times longer and 4 times heavier than anyone else's. And when you line up the numbers, the gap is genuinely ridiculous. A US federal limit semi tops out at around 23 meters and 36 tons. A European standard truck caps at 18.75 meters. A Canadian turnpike double in Ontario runs about 41 meters at best. An Australian Type 2 road train is legally 53.5 meters and can weigh up to 200 tons on the heaviest private haul configurations. One Australian 4-trailer combination weighs more than 4 fully loaded American semis combined. On certain Pilbara mining roads, you will see 4-trailer ore haulers that weigh more than a fully fueled Boeing 737 rolling down a dirt road at 90 kilometers an hour. But here is what that does not explain. The legal limits in other countries are not arbitrary bureaucracy. They are written around real constraints. In the US, Canada, and Europe, the roads are crowded, the bridges are older, and the next town is 20 minutes away at most. A 53-meter vehicle in any of those environments becomes a rolling roadblock that cannot overtake, cannot turn, and cannot stop. None of those constraints apply to Central Australia. The Stewart Highway runs 2,834 kilometers from Darwin to Port Augusta. On huge stretches of it, you will drive 100 kilometers without seeing another vehicle. The bridges are not rated for commuter traffic. They are rated for live export cattle loads. The road itself was built around the trucks, not the other way around. But low traffic alone does not explain it either. Saudi Arabia has empty roads. Mongolia has empty roads. Neither country runs 53-meter 4-trailer monsters. So it is not just space. It is not just distance. It is not just sparse population. The thing that actually separates Australia isn't what's on the road now. It's what the road replaced. And that's where the story gets strange, because the real explanation starts with an animal that most people don't associate with trucks at all. Before the road trains, Australia had a freight system no other country on Earth has ever had. From the 1860s to the 1930s, the goods that moved across the outback moved on the backs of camels, thousands of them. By the year 1900, roughly 12,000 working camels were hauling mail, flour, telegraph wire, mining equipment and station supplies hundreds of kilometers at a time, led by cameleers from what is now Pakistan and Afghanistan. Australians called them the Afghans. The country still carries the evidence. Australia has the largest feral camel population on Earth today, roughly 1 million animals, all descended from the ones that were turned loose when the trucks arrived. Here's why that matters. The camels didn't work solo. They worked in strings. A single cameleer would lead 6, 10, sometimes 20 camels nose to tail, each carrying about 300 kilograms. The entire freight logic of outback Australia, long multi-unit convoys, one driver, one continuous line of cargo, was already built around that model before a single truck ever turned its wheels. When trucks arrived, they didn't replace a system of individual wagons. They replaced a system of chained-together freight units, and that's the detail the rest of the world never had. In 1934, the Australian government imported a British AEC 8x8 military truck with 2 Dyson self-tracking trailers and sent it to Alice Springs specifically to kill the camel trade. It was called the Government Road Train, and the economics were brutal. The Afghan cameleers charged 2 shillings and 6 pence per ton per mile. The Government Road Train charged 6.5 pence, roughly 1/5 the price. The camel economy didn't just decline, it was extinguished inside a single decade. And this connects directly to something sitting in your grocery store right now. But we'll get to that. Then the real leap happened. In 1945, a bush mechanic named Kurt Johansson, born at Deepwell Station 80 kilometers south of Alice Springs, holder of a driver's license at age 11, took a U.S. Army World War II surplus Diamond T tank carrier, named it Bertha, and bolted on 3 home-built trailers. Total length, 54 meters. Capacity, 100 head of cattle in a single run. But Bertha wasn't special because it was big. It was special because of one tiny engineering detail. Johansson's trailers were self-tracking. Both wheel sets on every trailer could steer, which meant every trailer followed the exact path of the truck in front of it. That single innovation is what makes everything after it possible. Here's why. Without self-tracking, a 53-meter combination would cut every corner, destroy every soft shoulder, and jackknife on the first creek crossing. With self-tracking, it threads needle-narrow bush tracks and dry creek beds that an American or European rig physically cannot cross. Johansson's original trailers, built from repurposed U.S. Army Bren gun carriers in a shed in the desert, traveled 2 million miles before they finally retired. For reference, the average American semi-trailer retires at around 750,000 miles. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. The road train only survived because of something the rest of the world built better than Australia ever did. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The reason road trains exploded in Australia and nowhere else isn't something Australia has. It's something Australia catastrophically failed to build. The fault is traceable to a decision made in the 1850s that went uncorrected for more than 100 years. When the Australian colonies built their railway networks in the 19th century, each colony picked a different track gauge. New South Wales went with 1,400 35mm standard gauge. Victoria went with 1,600mm broad gauge. South Australia and Western Australia went with 1,067mm narrow gauge. Queensland went narrow too, which meant that when 2 rail lines met at a state border, they physically could not connect. Every ton of freight had to be unloaded from one train and reloaded onto another, every single time. The industry has a name for this. It is called break of gauge. Here's the number that makes it real. Gauge standardization between mainland capital cities in Australia was not completed until 1982. A full century of freight chaos. During World War II, troop trains carrying Australian soldiers had to stop at its state borders so the men could physically walk from one train to another on different rails, Every ton of wheat, wool, cattle, ore, and manufactured goods moving between states was losing hours at each gauge break for the entire 20th century. But the real wound went deeper than the gauge problem. The top half of the continent had almost no rail at all. A direct rail link from Adelaide to Darwin was proposed in the 1870s. It was not completed until 2004. For 130 years, the entire northern half of Australia, an area larger than Western Europe, had no continuous railway. Everything that moved through it moved by road, or, before that, by camel. So while every other country with serious distance problems was building transcontinental railroads, the United States finished the first transcontinental railroad in 1869, Canada finished in 1885, and Russia completed the Trans-Siberian in 1916. Australia, by contrast, was accidentally building the world's most freight-dependent highway system. Not by choice, by railway failure. And then the government made it official. In the 1960s, the federal government launched the Beef Roads Scheme, a massive investment program that sealed and upgraded outback routes specifically so that road trains could move live cattle from remote stations to northern ports. The infrastructure was engineered around the trucks. Bridges were designed for them. Rest stops were designed for them. Fuel stations were spaced for them. Nowhere else in the world did a government build highway infrastructure around multi-trailer freight combinations as the primary user. That is exactly why what you are about to hear should change how you see this. The same system that replaced the camels, survived the gauge disaster, and was paved over by the Beef Roads program, is quietly feeding you right now. Here's the part almost nobody outside Australia understands. This is not a domestic oddity. It is a supply line that already touches your life. And now we are about to see how a truck you have only seen in documentaries has probably already delivered something that ended up in your house. Start with beef. Australia is one of the largest beef exporters on the planet, and an enormous share of that beef spends part of its life on a road train. A steer raised on the Barkly tableland or the Kimberley rides a 150-head cattle triple down to a sale yard or a live export port. If you have eaten Australian beef in a Singapore McDonald's, a Jakarta burger chain, a Middle Eastern restaurant, or an Asian supermarket, it started its last journey in the trailer behind a truck like the one you watched in that documentary clip. Then there is iron. The Pilbara region of Western Australia is one of the largest iron ore producing regions on Earth. On private haul roads inside those mine complexes, you will see quad road trains weighing up to 170 tons, moving ore from pit to port. That ore becomes steel in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean mills. That steel becomes the skyscraper, the car chassis, the shipping container, the construction crane you see in nearly every skyline photo of East Asia. Then there is lithium. Western Australia produces roughly half the world's mined lithium. It moves to port on a road train. The battery in your phone, in your laptop, in your electric car statistically has a very good chance of containing metal that spent part of its life behind a triple trailer combination on an unsealed outback road. And then there's the part that hits differently. Australia's remote Aboriginal communities, some with populations under 500, are entirely dependent on road train delivery. In the wet season, when roads flood and are cut for weeks, entire towns eat down what the last truck dropped. Fresh food, medicine, fuel, everything. Stop the trucks, and people don't just get inconvenienced. They run out. All of that supply chain, the beef, the ore, the battery metal, the remote community groceries, exists because one bush mechanic in 1945 figured out how to make a trailer follow a truck around a corner. So here's where you actually land. You watched footage of a 4-trailer monster crawling down a red dirt highway, and you thought you were looking at an Australian oddity. A bigger is better flex. A tourism board postcard. Maybe a cowboy industry that refused to modernize. But what you were actually looking at was a 160-year-old freight problem solved by Afghan camel trains, a 1934 British military truck sent to Alice Springs, a World War II surplus American tank carrier rebuilt in a Bush workshop by a man who got his driver's license at 11, a self-tracking trailer invention that the rest of the world still can't reproduce at scale. 3 colonial governments that couldn't agree on the width of a train track, a railway network that wasn't standardized until 1982, a 130-year delay in building a transcontinental rail line to Darwin, and a federal beef roads program that paved the outback specifically for trucks that didn't exist anywhere else. You're not looking at a truck. You're looking at the only place on Earth where the road is the railway. The burger, the steel beam, the battery, the iron ore in the car parked outside, all of them touched this system before they touched you. Most people will never know that. You now do. And if you think one truck running 4 trailers in the middle of nowhere is strange, wait until we get into why the same country sends ships back across the Pacific completely empty on purpose.